Thank you very much for that introduction, Carolyn, and thank you everybody for welcoming me here today. It really is a pleasure to come and speak to you all. I've realised that I have the shift just after lunch, so I'm hoping that I'll be able to keep you awake, and all those in Europe who are joining online, you'll all just be getting ready for your dinner. So hopefully we can make this talk as interesting as possible to keep everybody listening and interested. And I'm going to be talking to you about international collaboration, really from a regulator's perspective. So let's begin. So I think we can all agree that pharmacovigilance is a global connection that we all have. And we all do this role for one real common goal, and that is to make sure that medicines that are available to patients are safe and effective as possible. Well, I hope that's the common goal that we all have in pharmacovigilance. And your systems that you have, your PV systems, they are global in nature. You are collecting that adverse event data from all around the world, and that's feeding into our regulatory systems. And that's really important for regulators to make sure that we are collecting that information on a global nature, one, because we share that common goal for medicines to be as safe as possible, but also in our respective populations to make sure that we have that ability to look at that adverse event data and make sure the benefit risk profile is as favourable as possible. And therefore it makes sense that as regulators we collaborate more. We start to discuss that information between each other. We use that to ensure patient safety, and we also use it so that we can reduce the burden on you as market authorization holders, and that you're able to do your jobs to the best effect as possible without having too much regulatory burden on you. So today I'm going to start with an overview on that international collaboration, and I'm going to start with looking at some current projects, really at a medicinal regulator viewpoint, so not just in the inspectorate. And then I'll be looking at some of the international groups that are around for regulations, and then concentrating on some international agreements. And this really I'm focusing on international agreements that we have in our compliance teams and across inspectorates. And then I'll finish with some working examples and some training initiatives. So hopefully that will be an insight into some of the up and coming steps that we take and the way we're moving. So obviously I'm talking from a MHRA perspective here. And then once I'm finished, what the intention is that Sherry will then talk about some particular aspects of how inspectors collaborate, and then Paul will give some specific examples as well. So I'm going to start off with the Access Consortium. So this is a consortium that the MHRA joined in January 2021. And it's a consortium made up of 5 regulators, so Australia, Canada, Singapore, Switzerland, and the United Kingdom. And the aim of this consortium is to share research and improve timely patient access to high quality and safe and effective medicines. And the consortium really aims to explore different ways in which information can be shared, and it has several working groups. And one of those working groups is looking at how inspection outcomes and reports can be shared and across regulators. They're currently operating under the 2021 to 2024 plan. And one of those commitments that they've made is to look at GMP inspectors, so good manufacturing inspection reports, and how those inspection outcomes can be shared. So hopefully the outcome from that will be favourable, and we can start to look at how we can move that forwards in other GXPs. The second project I wanted to talk about is Project Orbis, and I find this quite interesting. And this provides a framework for the concurrent submission of market applications across a number of regulators. And this is particularly for oncology products. So the regulators involved in this are the same 5 as from the Access Consortium, plus the US FDA who lead on this project, and also Brazil. And this coordinates the submission for review of market authorizations and extensions to licenses for cancer medicines. And the aim is to, for a market authorization to submit that one application, and then it gets submitted to all of those regulators at the same time to be reviewed. The thing about this project is although those submissions are all put in together, it therefore reduces burden on the MAHs. They just have to submit one submission. It does still allow regulators to make sovereign decisions. And I think that's something that I want to highlight, that although when we talk about international collaboration, I think sometimes we think that we all have to make the same decision. But actually, I think Project Orbis presents an opportunity where decisions can be made in their own right, and each regulator is deciding whether they license the medicine or not. But the actual burden on the MAH is reduced by just making that one submission. And Project Orbis has been successful. I think there's around 20 medicines that have been licensed through this route currently. So just some other international collaborations that I wanted to mention that impact on the inspection teams and pharmacovigilance. So ICH, we always have representation on ICH guideline updates, whether that's through the inspection teams themselves or we have other delegates from the agency. So sometimes our safety and surveillance colleagues will join those, and then they'll feed back any information and ask for our input in the inspectorate where required. We have input into the SIOMS working group. So at the moment we have colleagues from safety and surveillance in the MHRA who are sitting on the AI SIOMS working group for pharmacovigilance. And then PICS. Now this is the Pharmaceutical Inspectorate Cooperation Scheme. And this is something that I'm very passionate about, and Sherry's going to talk about in much more detail, and then Paul will also. So I'm not going to go into much detail, but this is a scheme that is set up specifically for inspectors. Regulators sign up to this scheme, and it's a way that we can benefit from best practice sharing. We look at hot topics and training, and look at how we can train each other as well. So it's a really good scheme. And I'm deputy chair of one of the working groups there, but I won't go into any more detail on that because Sherry and Paul will talk about that a bit more later. So ICRMA, this is the International Collation of Medicines Regulatory Authorities. Now this is a voluntary scheme and it's an executive level. And the aim of this is to bring regulatory authorities together to look at where there may be similar challenges across different regulatory bodies who authorise medicines, and also looking at ways to harmonise. And there's a few pharmacovigilance work streams that sit under this. One of them is looking at vaccines, one of them is looking at increased AE reporting, and the other is looking at big data. And then we have a lot of bilateral agreements. Now they sit across the MHRA at a regulatory level, but also within the compliance teams also. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of those bilateral agreements that we have within the compliance teams. So we have, obviously, I'm here today talking to you at the US FDA, Health Canada and MHRA Joint Symposium. We have bilateral agreements with both the US FDA and Health Canada, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here talking with colleagues from both of those regulatory authorities. Apart from supporting each other at these sort of conferences, we also have regular meetings where we meet on a quarterly basis, and that gives us the opportunity to share intelligence that we may have received. We share our inspection plans, we share inspection reports, we talk about new initiatives which we might have, and we can benefit from training with each other as well. We also have a similar relationship between the MHRA and the Therapeutic Goods Administration in Australia, and we could again share inspection schedules and reports. And we have had Australian inspectors who have come out. Well, they've joined online remotely through some of our inspections, and we've shared best practices. And then through the Northern Ireland protocol, we have a relationship with the European Medicines Agency, and we share our inspection schedules, and we share inspection reports, and that goes both ways. So just wanted to take a minute to discuss why these interactions are so important and why these collaborations bring benefits. obviously we communicate significant inspection findings. That means that we can ensure patient safety, we can make sure that any intelligence that is coming through, we discuss with each other and the best ways to move forwards, and we use that intelligence within our own systems to decide who to go and inspect or when we need to take action and when we don't. But one of the other things I wanted to allude to is, one of our aims is also to reduce the burden that is on market authorisation holders. And an example of this was an inspection that the MHRA conducted, and where we found a large number of adverse events that had not been reported into the safety database, and they were residing outside of the safety database. The company had been inundated with a large number of reports in a short amount of time, and were struggling to process them. So we issued a critical finding at that time, but rather than just dealing with that ourselves, we communicated that with our partners where we had the bilateral agreements, and we were able to come to a decision together about how best to go forwards with that. And rather than everybody rushing to inspect the company, we all collaborated on what kind of corrective and preventative actions we would like to see. And then that was collated together, and we were able to put one group of those to the company to reduce the burden on them to fix that. And then when it came to re-inspection, rather than all of the regulatory agencies going and conducting their own inspection, the European Medicines Agency led on that re-inspection, and us as the MHRA went as observers, and then we were able to have that assurance that remediation activities had happened without putting extra burden on having double inspection within a short time frame. So just to finish today, I just wanted to concentrate on some of the training initiatives that we have. So I said earlier at the start that pharmacovigilance is a global activity, but it's actually becoming more global. There are more and more regulators who are starting to introduce pharmacovigilance legislation, and because of that, they are starting to introduce more and more inspectors who are looking to make sure that those regulations are complied with. So at the MHRA, we think it's very important that we are involved in that training, and we have a lot of experience in inspecting pharmacovigilance, so we try to aid those trainings where we can. And we have sent our inspectors over to China and trained inspectors from the China National Medical Products Administration, and we gave extensive training on a suite of different presentations to them. More recently, we have had the Ghana Food and Drugs Authority come over to the MHRA. We have safety and surveillance colleagues who look at the adverse event reporting, who have gone over to Ghana to help them implement their systems, and then they've come over to us, and we've helped to train their inspectors from everything from who we go to inspect and when, how we're deciding on that criteria, to what we look at when we're on inspection and how we report those inspections. And we are committed members at the MHRA to the African Union Smart Surveillance Programme, and this is part of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And this is training that is provided to African nations to support their pharmacovigilance safety systems. Our safety and surveillance colleagues have been part of this for a while now, and it's something that we are starting to develop within the inspectorate as well, and we are very keen to support this. So hopefully that has given you a good insight into some of the initiatives we have. So there are a number of international collaborations ongoing. We do already share a lot of information with each other on intel. We don't just keep that to ourselves. One of the aims is to reduce that burden on industry. We are trying to do that, but we do recognise that there are continued efforts required in this area, and it's something that we can keep continuing to push to see how we can collaborate a bit better, how we can use the information that we've got in newer ways, and continue those efforts. So I'm going to pass on to Sherry Booz now, who's going to talk you through the PIC scheme. So I hope you enjoy. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Sherry Bose, and I'm the Director for the Division of Enforcement and Post-Marketing Safety in CDER's Office of Compliance in the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. I'm really excited to speak to you all today about the newly formed PICS Good Pharmacovigilance Practices Expert Circle. I'll start by giving you a brief history of the PICS GPV. We'll review the organizational structure of the Expert Circle, the goals of the Expert Circle, and finally we'll review the outputs of the Expert Circle's working groups. In 2014, the PICS Working Group on GCP and GPV was formed to facilitate technical cooperation and harmonization practices. This included the information sharing amongst PICS participating authorities through the Joint Visit Program. In 2021, there was a proposal to dissolve the GCP and GPV working groups and create two separate and distinct expert circles due to their very different technical priorities. And then finally, in 2022, the PICS committee established the GPV Expert Circle with the purpose of facilitating training and information sharing for inspectors who specialize in GPV. This is our organizational structure. I'm currently the chair of the GPV Expert Circle, and we have representatives from 16 participating authorities such as MHRA, Health Canada, and EMA, just to name a few. We kicked off our first Expert Circle meeting in February 2023 and established and received approval of our mandate by the PICS Secretariat in November of 2023. There are 3 working groups that fall under the umbrella of the Expert Circle, which include the AI Machine Learning Working Group, GPV Best Practices Working Group, and the Joint Visit Program. We'll discuss these working groups a little bit more in the next few slides. The overall goal of the GPV Expert Circle is to develop expertise by establishing a network of GPV experts, to train, design, develop, and execute a training program for GPV inspectors, to network, to develop a communication system between PICS participating authorities, and finally to represent, to develop and maintain a common approach and interpretation of international guidelines. The outputs of the 3 working groups are summarized on this slide, and we'll go into each working group a little bit further, but the overall takeaway of the Expert Circle collectively is to establish a formal network of GPV inspectors across the regulatory agencies with the goals of information sharing and harmonization. The AI Machine Learning Working Group's main focus is to design, develop, and execute the Expert Circle meeting to provide training for GPV inspectors to obtain the required knowledge and competence to inspect key topics in a harmonized manner. The GPV Best Practices Working Group's goal is to design and develop documents for publication on the PICS website and PICS Inspectorate Academy. This again helps train GPV inspectors in a harmonized manner, as well as being an excellent resource for PICS participating authorities who are still developing their inspectional programs. And then finally, the Joint Visit Program. This has been a great success in the past, with 32 GCP-GPV groups formed in 2017-2018. It was on hold during the pandemic due to travel restrictions, but the triplicate groups were able to complete the programs remotely as appropriate. The JVP is a great opportunity to learn from each other and harmonize inspectional procedures and techniques across the different regulators by observing inspections in real time. There will be a new call for regulatory volunteers under the new GPV Expert Circle with opportunity for face-to-face and or remote options due to travel restrictions some countries may still have. In summary, the new GPV Expert Circle was formed with the goals to develop expertise, train, network, and represent. Working groups are formed to establish a network of GPV inspectors across the regulatory authorities, and this will provide an opportunity to compare and harmonize inspectional procedures and techniques across the different regulators. We at FDA are honored to have been chosen to lead this very important effort on behalf of PICS, and we look forward to the success of the newly formed GPV Expert Circle. Thank you.
So, bonjour à tous. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Paul Baillargeon. I'm the GVP inspector with Health Canada. I'd like to thank the FDA for giving me the chance to come and present Health Canada's perspective on joint GVP experiences. So today I'll be discussing about two different action items that were taken. So as mentioned by Sherry, the Joint Visits Program, the PICS Joint Visit Program, as well as Health Canada's joint inspection with the EMA during COVID-19 pandemic. We will review the lessons learned throughout and as well as summary of these projects. So the first project was the joint visits with the PICS. The objectives were quite clear, so provide training for all the inspectors, harmonization of the different inspections, as well as maintain mutual confidence. To do so, the inspections were carried out by the 3 different health authorities throughout a 24-month period, one in each participating country. We say visit because the host health authority is observing the other members during one of their regular GVP inspection. So this all started in 2018, with the first one being in December 2018 by the MHRA. The next one was in May 2019 with the FDA. And as we know, because of the COVID, the March 2021 was a virtual one, but it still happened during that time. So if we look at what was assessed at the process level, so these visits enabled inspectors to go through each of these areas that are discussed on my slide. So every inspector was able to provide his own health authority structure, regulations and guidance documents that are associated with the GVP program. Each health authority was able to provide the site and product selection process of how they choose. And as well, they were able to go through the inspection process themselves. So just the scope of the inspection, how does the inspectors have pre-inspection activities, the report issuance, CAPA plan assessment, as well as the tool used by the inspectors. A report was presented to the PICS to discuss all aspects of this project. As you may know, as we touched base upon earlier, everyone remembers the COVID-19 pandemic. Health authorities needed to get creative, leverage opportunity, and work jointly with trusted regulators in order to move forward in these periods of lockdown and travel restrictions. So this brings us to our second project, where Health Canada was able to conduct its first joint GVP inspection with the European Medicines Agency. Just to give you some background information, in May 2021, Health Canada contacted an MAH to schedule a GVP inspection just before the start of the summer session. Unfortunately, the MAH informed us that the EMA was also coming just before us. So Health Canada actively engaged the EMA to suggest a partnership for the inspection to see if resources could be joined and efficiencies could be gained for both agencies. Fortunately, there was a positive response from the EMA. Therefore, right away, we installed a pre-inspection meeting so that all inspectors involved in the inspection could provide a game plan. So what we did is we sent the notification to the MAH explaining that both EMA and Health Canada would be coming at the same time. EMA had already provided pre-inspection requests, and they covered most of Health Canada's pre-inspection requests as well. We did provide specific Canadian requests, but those were added to the originally added one. Since the inspection was already initiated by the EMA, it was decided that the EMA would lead the specific sessions and discussions. Health Canada would be present and could ask any questions as well as they wanted. Health Canada also led a couple of sessions that were for specific Canadian topics on pharmacovigilance. The MAH was to receive 2 inspection reports, so one from EMA and one from Health Canada, if any observations were made. The inspection was held virtually, so 10 days virtual. So the EMA shared their video conferencing services as well as their SharePoint access to all the inspectors and the MAH. Regarding time zone differences, all inspections started early in the morning, so around 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And during those sessions, there were predetermined sessions for each of the GVP topic. And during those sessions, verbal requests were made, but also in order to provide efficiency, they were also made in a written format, in the SharePoint service, so that easily the MAH and the inspectors could go back to them and see the responses there. There were some internet issues, but they were very sporadic, so no issues there. We did have daily briefings, so in the morning we would have the discussion for any outstanding issues, and one after the inspection day where we would discuss the possible observation and discussions on the next day topics. Both health authorities provided observation report to the MAH according to their own inspection process. So what happens here for Health Canada is we have an exit meeting at the end. It's where we present the draft exit notice report. This is a possibility for the MAH to clarify any points that they see in the observation. Unfortunately, EMA was not part of that exit meeting. So once the MAH provided a response to those reports, the CAPA was reviewed by both health authorities and discussed amongst ourselves. For the MAH, it was mostly a copy-paste, so there was no really added extra work to provide responses to both of the reports, so that's time there gained for them. As well, Health Canada provided a closeout letter, which was sent when the CAPA plan was deemed acceptable. So Health Canada's lessons learned. So for both the joint visits and the joint inspection itself, we saw that the PV requirements are similar across jurisdictions, and their assessment can be divided amongst regulators. I like the divide and conquer phase. So we saw that for the three parts there, the case reception, case processing, annual summary reports, as well as review of IT systems used in PV, these were quite similar across the different regulations, so they could be combined within the same sessions. Whereas the PSMF file and QPPV portion were more of an EMA portion, but Health Canada did attend those sessions in order to familiarize ourselves with this process. The last 2 points are Canadian-specific requirements, so the unusual failure in efficacy and the notification of foreign action. Again, these were led by Health Canada, but all the different participants were there for familiarization. So if we look again at the advantages, so as we discussed throughout the day, confidence and collaboration is increased between health authorities. Resources can be shared between health authorities, a reduction in travel costs as well for virtual inspection. It is a more efficient inspection process for the MAH. They do have only 10 days of virtual instead of having 20 days total with 2 different health authorities. We did encounter some technical constraints though. As I mentioned, the internet connection can be difficult for multiple participants from around the world. As well, document sharing application can be tricky, especially when MAHs are sharing confidential documents. So it's important for regulators to provide them with a safe space so that they can share those documents. Virtual inspections take more time though for health authorities. We have to schedule sessions via video conference for specific topics. Outside of those, it's difficult to interact with the MAH to get responses to small interrogations. As well, when you're on site, it is possible to get quick ad hoc sessions to resolve questions directly. The time zone difference can cause delays sometimes. It can start very early or very late for some of the MAHs. And what inspectors missed the most during the virtual session was the interaction face-to-face. It's very difficult to see the body language of the person that you're interviewing. So that was missed during the inspection. So to recap, our takeaways from these, the joint visits and the inspection. So joint inspection are not only possible, but successful. Technologies as basic as video conference and SharePoint were very useful tools for inspections teams so far apart. All the MAH's PV systems were reviewed by multiple inspector eyes, inspector with different expertise. Health Canada would not have been able to cover so much in the same amount of time. Increasing collaboration and moving towards inspection reliance is also a point that's needed to be considered here. Regarding time, it does not require more time for both agencies besides the pre-inspection meetings that we had, and it will enable all to perform the inspection within the allocated period like we requested. MAH will have two agencies at the same time, but to go over the same PV system. SMEs are less solicited and free to perform their regular tasks. A cost savings for sure, like I mentioned, so virtual inspection can be done at home/office for the inspectors. It is important, though, that we identify leaders, like I mentioned earlier, for the different sessions. It will provide a better preparation for each of the inspectors, more time, and then we can focus on one subject instead of multiple at a time. Remote inspections process is promising by allowing remote interviews with subject and matter experts from various locations, software demonstrations, remote navigation, or review of MAH's documents. And like we mentioned, there is a possibility of a hybrid. Again, the invaluable opportunity for inspectors to share best inspection practices were a great training experience for inspectors from all agencies present. The invaluable opportunity to discuss practices and differences in regulatory frameworks, inspection processes, and compliance activities related to PV. Health Canada continued its program review by initiating the review of GVP guidance documents and increasing inspector training opportunities. As well, the last point, so globalization helps align international GV expectations. There are differences in the health authorities' PV regulations versus Health Canada's PV regulations, but still enabling joint inspections. Most companies have global activities requiring multiple input from various sites. Therefore, remote inspections may provide regulators a new way to conduct or collaborate on international inspections. So thank you very much for this presentation.